So you're studying Chinese every day, listening to podcasts, practicing with apps, but suddenly you hit a wall and your progress just seems to stop. So despite putting in the same effort that got you this far, you feel stuck. Your motivation starts to tank and you start to question if you're even cut out for this language learning malarkey. So if this sounds familiar, you've likely hit a Chinese learning plateau. So plateaus happen for 4 very specific reasons. And once you understand what's really going on, you'll realize that feeling stuck isn't a dead end. It's actually, more often than not, the moment right before a breakthrough. So I'm going to show you exactly why your current approach stops working. And more importantly, the 4 techniques that will break you through to the other side, because plateaus aren't random. They're predictable and they're fixable. And if you're looking for help getting fluent fast, join our free course and community of Chinese learners making progress every single day. Link in the description. And before I show you how to break through, let me show you what's really happening when you experience a language learning plateau with Chinese. Well, first of all, this is not really about your ability or your level of dedication, right? This happens when your effort stops producing perceived results. And this creates stress, confusion, and self-doubt. You feel like you're spinning your wheels and kind of moving nowhere. And there are 4 main culprits behind this. And once you see them, you'll understand why your current approach isn't working anymore. So the first culprit, cause of this feeling of slow progress, plateauing, is too much passive immersion. So here's what I see happening with a lot of language learners. They spend a week or so binge watching Chinese Netflix shows and feeling like they are making progress. And they go out and try to speak to someone in Chinese and their brain just shut down. They don't feel any difference from before they did the immersion compared to afterwards. This is the first common problem, right? Most people practice too passively. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but everyone says to watch native speaking content. And yes, exposure matters. It's important for your listening ability. But the problem is that just watching, say, Netflix or YouTube in Chinese, even if it's at your level, is too passive. You can't absorb a language through osmosis. It's like trying to learn physics by watching advanced physics videos. You might feel good watching it, but your brain isn't actually processing the information in a way that sticks and gives you the ability to produce it fluently in conversation. To do that, your brain needs active engagement. It needs to work with the language, not just wash over it. And people often say, well, that's how children learn, right? They just consume the language a lot. It's like, no, actually, children are listening and constantly practicing what they hear, constantly trying to speak. Now, the second big culprit of causing plateaus, overthinking grammar. But even when you try to be more active, there's another problem. Many Chinese learners overthink grammar. They obsessively study grammar rules, drill conjugation, analyze sentence patterns. I did the same thing. I did it for months, actually. This conscious study approach feels productive, but actually is preventing your progress. So when you hit a plateau, your brain tricks you into thinking you need more rules, more analysis, more conscious understanding, more study in the traditional sense. So you might double down on that grammar study, and that actually slows you down because in reality, you will pick up grammar rules naturally through real practice and feedback. Now, the third culprit that causes many learners to hit a plateau is that their learning has become unbalanced, right? So they're either going too top down or too bottom up, and both approaches hit walls, right? So top down means memorizing, say, phrases without knowing individual words or characters that make up the phrase. It's kind of like building a house with no foundation to hold it in place. You can construct a few rooms here and there, but eventually you can't expand because you don't understand the foundation. Now, bottom up means learning individual components with no real practice in real context. That's like kind of collecting bricks or creating building materials, but never actually building the stuff. So you've got all these pieces and you can't use them fluidly. And most people swing between these extremes when they plateau, but neither approach alone will help you break through. Now, the fourth culprit is stress from uncertainty. So most people don't realize that stress doesn't come from slow progress. Stress comes from not knowing how to make faster progress. So without a clear system, your wins feel random and your effort feels kind of empty. It's like wandering through a maze blindfolded. Even when you're moving forward, it feels kind of directionless, right? So this uncertainty creates a stress cycle. You feel stuck? Do you try harder with the same method? When that doesn't work, you switch methods randomly. When that doesn't work, you question yourself. The stress builds, and that stress kills your motivation to continue trying, to continue progressing. So how do you break through these plateaus? Well, it all comes down to using methods that get results and that build your confidence. So when you know exactly what to do next and you can track your progress clearly, that feeling of being stuck just disappears. You start seeing wins again. Small ones at first, yeah, but then bigger ones after that. So let me show you 4 game-changing techniques that will get you moving again. First, to break through language learning plateaus, it's important to have the right structure, the right foundation. Most people learn kind of whatever feels interesting or whatever their app or textbook or tutor throws at them. That's kind of like trying to build a house by starting with random parts like the windows or the roof. So great structure is powered by 2 things, frequency and layering, right? So with frequency, it's kind of obvious, right? You focus on learning what actually matters first. Start with the most common characters and words, not random vocabulary or whatever's in your textbook. So just 1,000 common characters covers 90% roughly of everything you'll see and hear in daily life. The next 1,000 characters only adds another 7%. So if you learn the wrong 1,000 characters first, you're really wasting a lot of time there. And the same logic applies to words, right? So how do you find the most common characters and words? Well, you could just look up Chinese character and word frequency lists. It's pretty simple. Don't just trust your intuition about what's important. Trust the data. So the second key element of structure is layering your progress in the right order. So you need to make sure that you have 3 different lists that you're learning from: characters, words, and sentences. And you don't learn the sentences if you don't know the words and the characters. And you don't learn the words if you don't know the characters, ideally, right? You can learn words without knowing the characters. You can look at sentences, of course, without knowing every word and character. It's just a bit harder, takes a bit longer. And we're going for ease and efficiency wherever possible, right? So think of it like building a pyramid where each level supports the next. You need that solid foundation before you can really reach the top. Most people try to skip levels or learn things out of order. They might learn some advanced vocabulary or grammar structures before they even know basic characters, right? And that's why they feel that sense of plateauing, because you get far less for your efforts when you learn a word like 顶针, thimble, than the word for 想要, want, right? So it kind of makes logical sense. So to advance even further beyond structure, you can use mental hacks that use your brain's natural strengths, which will allow you to learn the characters and words you need to break through plateaus faster and easier. So the problem with traditional memorization is that your brain is just terrible at remembering abstract information like sounds and symbols, right? So it will feel like you're plateauing, making very little progress if you try and say learn characters and words the traditional way of just like reviewing them over and over and over again, because you're forgetting almost as fast as you're learning, right? So it'll go in one ear and out the other. Huge waste of time, very exhausting and demotivating. On the other hand, your brain is incredible at remembering things like people, places, faces, objects, actions. So instead of fighting your brain, we work with it. We use techniques like mnemonic visualization and memory palaces. So a memory palace is a technique that turns abstract information like decks of cards, numbers of pi, Chinese characters, into vivid, memorable movie scenes, a mini movie in your mind that kind of captures everything you need to learn at once, and it's almost unforgettable. Now, learning characters makes words really, really simple and straightforward because you can see the inherent logic in the vast majority of Chinese words. Like they are built very similar to the English words like toothbrush and playground. So if you see the characters, you can see the meaning in like 98% of all words, like really obviously. But if any words don't stick, you can use mnemonics to make them stick. And we've got full videos on our channel about mnemonics and memory palaces that you can watch, or you can go ahead and check out the course and community by clicking the link in the description and just learn hundreds of characters and words step by step using these techniques. We've got new people in the community every week saying how many thousands of characters or words they've learned in literally months or sometimes even weeks using these techniques. So often plateaus are caused by simply not having enough vocabulary. And so these techniques solve that problem real fast. Now, the third technique I want to share with you to break through these learning plateaus is what's called comprehensible input. So comprehensible input means consuming content where you understand at least 80%, maybe even up to 100% of what's happening. not 50%, not getting the gist, actually understanding pretty much everything. So your brain can only learn from what it can really process. So if you're constantly guessing at meaning, your brain can't extract patterns automatically. And also to look up things all the time, like words, characters, it's very exhausting. It's quite intensive, right? So you won't be able to do this for very long. So here's how this works in practice. Instead of jumping to random, difficult content, you build up step by step. Start with sentences containing words you already know. To be honest, you could just stick with sentences all the way up to C1 plus level if you want, but you also do need to get some longer form content practice in as well, ideally with native content, gradually more and more as your skills progress, not just content made for learners. This will help you feel more progress because as you continue to practice building characters and words and practicing with sentences, you'll notice the ability to understand native content more and more. And this gives you that feeling of progress and motivation to continue, right? It makes you feel like you're not stuck in a plateau anymore. But you could start with graded readers. That's absolutely fine. Books specifically written for language learners at different levels. Or use reading apps or courses that adapt to your level and gradually experiment with more and more native content. Now, after a few weeks of doing all this at the right level, you'll stop noticing individual words and start seeing meaning directly. You'll catch yourself thinking in Chinese phrases without realizing it, right? You'll maybe even dream in Chinese if you do enough input. You'll find Chinese words popping into your head when you're thinking about daily activities. And you'll just generally notice your comprehension massively improving. Now, the fourth and final technique to move past your learning plateaus is to use retrieval and activation. So when you're reading, your brain gets lots of help, right? The character is right there on the page. You see the visual cues of it. You have context from the surrounding sentence. Your brain just has to match that with what it sees and what it knows. But when you're speaking or writing, your brain gets no help. It has to pull the information from memory with zero cues. And that's a completely different skill. It's a different part of the brain. Think about it. You could probably recognize thousands of faces, right? But how many could you draw from memory? How many of those faces could you instantly say their name from memory? Probably a lot less, right? So you can recognize your favorite songs instantly, but how many can you sing perfectly without the music? With language learning, it's the same kind of logic, right? Recognition is relatively easy. Production is relatively hard. And production is what actually makes you fluent. So there are two specific methods that train your brain for instant recall in real time in conversation. One is shadowing and the other is active recall or retrieval. So with shadowing, you listen to native audio and you repeat along with the speaker at the same time, but with a slight lag, kind of like an echo. You start with comprehensible example sentence audio, put on headphones, play the audio, and try to repeat everything you hear with the exact same timing, intonation, and emotion. Shadowing trains 3 skills simultaneously. Your ear learns to process rapid native speech, your mouth learns the muscle memory for fluid pronunciation, and your brain learns to think in real time in a Chinese sort of way, right? So at first, this will be a challenge. The speaker will feel way too fast, you'll stumble over words, and this happens to everyone. It's totally normal. After a few tries, or maybe even a couple of 100 tries, it will get easier and it'll be more effective. So go for tons of reps of the same set of sentences first, and when you can shadow them comfortably at full speed, you'll be ready to practice the next technique, active recall. So active recall is pretty much proven to be the best way, most efficient and effective way to learn anything, including language. So you can talk to yourself, you can try and produce Chinese just from memory by narrating your environment or kind of doing an audio journal, if you like. That's kind of fun, just hitting the record app, the audio notes app on your phone and just making a journal entry. You can also just try chatting with AI, of course. You could try chatting to native speakers as well and producing specific language in a targeted way. Now, my favorite way to do this right now is using flashcards. So you just create spaced repetition flashcards, some SRS software, just use that to create them with the English on the front and the Chinese text and ideally the audio on the back. And you just test yourself. So when you do both shadowing and active recall practice, you're training yourself not to translate and instead getting your brain to work directly in Chinese. Now, it seems like translation at first. Of course, you're translating from English to Chinese, but eventually what happens is it just becomes automatic. You don't think about the English. You can just naturally produce that Chinese sentence from memory once you've practiced enough. Now, when you combine all four of these techniques, they amplify each other, right? The structure ensures that you're learning the right things. The memory palaces and mnemonics make everything stick instantly. Comprehensible input gives you that sense of grammar and just a general sense of the language, that intuition. And the retrieval practice makes it active and automatic, gives you kind of the ability to produce everything in real time when you go to actually speak the language to a native speaker. So instead of feeling like you're fighting the language, it starts to feel like the language is working with you. Now, I never said this was all easy, right? But nothing that actually gets real results ever is. And you need real results to break through plateaus, okay? So it does take some hard work, but it's totally worth it. And you do not have to wait for weeks and weeks before you see any results. You'll see results after literally a few hours of doing this. So after a few weeks of doing these activities, your brain just starts offering up the Chinese language when you need it without you having to search for it or stutter or stumble. And that's when it hits you. You sound more like a native speaker. Not perfect, maybe you never will be perfect, but you sound way more natural and the language just comes to you. Kind of like the Chinese language belongs in your mouth, not like you're a foreigner trying to imitate sounds, right? So that's the moment you know you've broken through the plateau. And while it's totally possible for you to do everything I said today all on your own, it's going to take some time and there'll be a lot of questions along the way, maybe mistakes you'll make, time you'll waste. And so if you'd like everything done for you, all the words and characters and sentences laid out for you with flashcards and audio files, as well as a community filled with thousands and thousands of engaged learners and experts like myself and co-founder Phil Crimmins. If you want access to all of that for free, just click the link below to sign up, try it out. And then once you upgrade to the full program, MB Pro, you get access to 3,000 plus characters, almost 12,000 words, everything you need for pretty much any level of fluency that you want. Now, before we wrap up, I need to tell you something crucial that most people don't understand about plateaus. They're not always caused by doing the wrong thing. Sometimes you're doing the absolute right thing and you are improving, like maybe you're following what I just laid out for you in today's video, but you just don't perceive that progress at the moment. So perception can often lag behind reality, right? So think about this. So when you started learning Chinese, everything was new, right? Every word you learned was a massive jump in your ability. Going from 0 word to 10 words, that felt huge. But going from 1,000 words to 1,010 words, that feels like nothing. But your brain is consolidating and organizing all that information that you've been feeding it, right? It's making connections that you can't see yet. This is, of course, with the caveat that you're actually, again, using the techniques and approaches that I lay out in our YouTube videos, right? But if you're using a method that doesn't suck, that is actually scientifically proven to get results, and you're still feeling like you're plateauing, here are the mindset shifts that would change how you see everything. So first, replace the old way of thinking of plateaus as meaning that you are failing. Replace that with the new way of thinking. Plateaus mean I'm adapting. In fact, I've seen this so many times with our course members when they make a post in our community saying how frustrated they are, or they're hitting burnout, or they're fed up with not feeling progress. That is 9 times out of 10 when they're about to hit a breakthrough. So if you just push through and stay consistent during that peak frustration point, that feeling is often the moment right before your breakthrough. It won't be very long, maybe just a few days or a week or two before you feel a major breakthrough in your skill level. Because language learning, in my experience, is not a smooth, straight line upwards. It's a series of plateaus, each followed by like a sudden jump, all happening along some exponential curve, kind of like this one. So now you have the system and the tools that you need. 1, a clear structure, learn the most common elements first in the right order. 2, use memory techniques to make abstract information like characters and words stick really fast. 3, when you practice, make sure to use input you actually comprehend, and you'll build intuition through understandable context. And finally, make sure that you don't practice too passively too often. Your practice must use active memory through techniques like retrieval and shadowing. This isn't theory. This is the exact system that we've used to help thousands of members break through their plateaus and reach really good levels of Chinese and make really good progress way faster than they thought possible. Now, if you want a more in-depth guide to the memory techniques that I mentioned earlier, then watch this video next where I literally teach you how to read Chinese from scratch in around an hour using those very techniques.